There's a popular Catholic singer named Tatiana, and I don't know how often she still performs, but when she sings in Advent or a Lenten service, she often includes a song called One Solitary Life. And in some ways, the message or the poem, the song, One Solitary Life, reflects that grain of wheat that Jesus speaks of in today's gospel. In today's gospel, Jesus says, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains just a grain of wheat. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. And so this song, One Solitary Life, it reflects on the life of Jesus, and it notes that, he didn't travel the world. In his life on earth, even though he's God and he knows all languages, he didn't speak lots of languages. He spoke his Aramaic of his homeland, that, he was not a ruler in the worldly understanding of the term. In fact, the Gospels often say they wanted to take him off and make him king, and he would disappear. He chose not to have that worldly honor, which would be a strong lesson for us in our own day. And in those ways, he's like that grain of wheat who died. He had all these things that we associate with worldly fame. He chose not to have, not to participate in. But then it goes on. The song goes on to note that all of the kings in the history of the world and all of the armies in the history of the world have not affected the life of mankind to the same degree as this one solitary life. He bore fruit. Even though he rejected all those worldly honors, he's really changed the entire way we see the world. So many institutions that have come up because of his teaching in terms of hospitals and hospices, caring for the sick, caring for the dying, and honoring the dignity of all. The effort to make education widespread. All of these grew out of the teaching of Jesus, this one solitary life. Signs of how, he rejected worldly honors, and yet he bore tremendous fruit. We see the same pattern carried out in the lives of the saints. Today I just share with you three. St. Alphonsus Liguori lived in the 1700s, 1800s, and he was a brilliant man. At the age of 17, he was among the most successful lawyers in his city-state of Liguori. So tremendous talent. It said that he never lost a case. And then there was an instance of bribery, where he lost a case due to bribery, not due to justice. And he was so disappointed in the lack of justice by these human means that he renounced his civil lawyer career and became a priest and the founder of the Redemptorist order. So here you had the worldly success as a lawyer. He gave that up. He died, in a sense. But from it, the Redemptorists, their charism is to announce the gospel to the poor, the lost, the forgotten, the neglected. And so they proclaim the gospel throughout the world, in different parts of the world, on account of Alphonsus Liguori dying to himself and then bearing great fruit. Or if we look at it in the sense of today's first reading, God said that he would make a new covenant and he would write the law in our hearts. After devoting his life to, as a lawyer defending the laws of man, when he saw the limitations, which they're good, they're very good, we need those, and they help support society, but they have limitations, just like anything man-made. When he saw their limitations, he gave himself to the work of announcing the law written, awakening the law written in the heart. A second example is St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross. She lived in the early 1900s, the 1920s, 1930s. She was raised in a Jewish home In her adult years, young adult years, she became an atheist, and she was very gifted in philosophy. Even teaching in lecturing in the university, I believe it was Cologne, but in the German universities. And, because of the time she lived, she was limited in what role she could have. Based on talent, she probably would have been like a full professor. But at the time, women weren't able to do that. But she had a great career in the universities in teaching philosophy. And then she experienced the charity of a Catholic home. And she converted to the Catholic faith. Subsequently, she entered the cloistered convent as a Discalced Carmelite. And so she left the success of her university career. She died to herself and gave herself to the life of the Carmel. And in that way mirrored Jesus, who in our second reading said that while he was on this earth, he gave himself to prayers of supplication to the one who could save us. Now, due to the nature of her calling, of her vocation, we don't get to see the fruit that she bore. But in dying to her university career, she bore tremendous fruit and will continue to bear fruit. In some ways, I hope that she becomes a doctor of the church to bear even more fruit. Because of her Jewish roots, she was killed in the death camps during the Holocaust. And a third example, known very well to us, is Mother Teresa of Calcutta. She made a promise to God to always do his will, to not deny him anything. And that's the hardest way to die to ourselves, is she gave up her own will, saying, Lord, I will refuse you nothing. And out of that dying to herself, he was able to call her to minister to the poorest of the poor in Calcutta. And she became the foundress of the Missionaries of Charity. So we see the example in Jesus our Lord of, rejecting the worldly honors, dying to himself so that he might bear tremendous fruit. We see it play out again in the lives of the saints. And the question before us is, to what extent will we have the courage to die to ourselves, to die to our self-will, so as to bear fruit in the Lord?